By now, everyone's heard of our economy described as a K-shaped economy, but
All right, everyone, the January layoff notices are absolutely piling up.
I know I'm not the only adult that sits in their car wondering how they're making the most money they've ever made in their entire life, and it still doesn't seem to be enough.
Bloomberg is reporting that multiple U.S. companies are announcing mass layoffs and
Breaking news, as of now, 22 states are in an official recession. This means that for a vast portion of Americans, we are facing economic hardship. So don't let economists and Fox News reporters tell you we're fine, we're not in a recession, because we are and we have the data to prove it. Recession is often characterized by lack of job opportunities as well as persistent economic hardship lasting more than a few months. Current estimates suggest that 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Many people are struggling to put food on the table each day. States currently in or on the brink of recession include Oregon, Georgia, and Illinois, where I currently live. There has been a significant decline in economic activity in these states that has lasted for more than a few months. The craziest thing is that the District of Columbia, or DC, the capital of the country, is one of the territories that's hit the hardest right now. But why? Largely because of Trump's economic plan and the tariffs. So many politicians are lying to us right now by saying that our economy is the greatest in the world, especially those on the right. And I want you to know right now that no, you're not crazy. Yes, the economy is worse. Yes, it is harder to get a job. And yes, it is because of the person who is in office right now, as well as various other factors.
The pressures of being a school-aged mom in this economy are absolutely ridiculous. So we just got notes from the school saying that next week is Muffins with Mom, which is great. Love that they have an activity for parents to be involved with their kids at school, but that's an additional cost for breakfast. Then the next week is Valentine's Day parties. I have a kindergartner and a second grader, so both of them will have Valentine's Day parties. And each class has, 25 or 26 kids, and everything comes in packs of 12 or 24. So in order to get enough for the whole class, I have to buy 3 of whatever we're buying. And then I found out that school is actually closed on the 13th, when you would assume they would have a Valentine's Day party. So they're going to have it on the 12th. Well, when my kid's school is out, I still have to go to work, so my kids go to daycare. So that means on the 13th, they will have daycare parties. So now I have to buy Valentine's Day cards and snacks for those parties as well. And to top it off, my kids are in sports and activities, so we are constantly paying for things. And I understand, being a parent, it is my responsibility to pay for my children's things. But when we're doing one thing after another, after another, after another at school, it's really hard to keep up in this economy. I know I'm not the only adult that sits in their car wondering how they're making the most money they've ever made in their entire life, and it still doesn't seem to be enough. My rent is $2,000 a month, and I live in a townhouse.
And me too.
My car note is $535 a month, and that's on the low end compared to what I see a lot of people pay. My car insurance...
That's on the low end. That's the best.
Is $370 between 2 vehicles.
Oh my god, Nestor, I'm gonna drop kick somebody. Okay, so you got $530 a month for the car payment. So $530 plus $370, that's $900 a month. $10 grand a year for a fucking car. Okay, that's smart. I'm gonna offer solutions too. There's a loophole to insurance. I just got mine back, also for 2 cars, paid off, no car payments, in this great state of Florida, most expensive in the land, for a 6-month policy, one total payment of $762. It's for 6 months, for both cars. I'm no mathematician, but that sounds about $60 per car a month. There you go. This is nationwide liability insurance. It exists. That's how much money I save by not having Geico.
by now, everyone's heard of our economy described as a K-shaped economy, but I heard an analogy that I think even better describes what's happening. As a reminder, the K-shaped economy is characterized as one in which the wealthiest Americans are growing their wealth and spending more at the same time that middle and lower income Americans are losing purchasing power and spending less. And this is clearly depicted in this chart that shows us that nearly 60% of consumer spending came from the top 20% of households, at the same time that 40% of spending came from the bottom. And as you can see from this chart, this is a record low. And adding to this picture of widening inequality, Bloomberg reports that the top 1% wealthiest households grew their wealth by $5 trillion in 2025 to a collective total of $55 trillion. And this share of wealth by the richest Americans is now at its highest level since World War II. And rather than referring to this as a K-shaped economy, some are now calling it a barbell economy. And this is because the economy is heavily weighted with the wealthy at the top and the poor at the bottom, and an increasingly stressed middle class holding the two ends together. And my 2 cents is the middle class that's holding this whole thing up is at risk of continued decline with the increase in layoffs that we're seeing, as well as the loss of purchasing power as wages are not keeping up with inflation. And this puts the entire economy at risk because of its reliance on an increasingly smaller number of workers and households. And if that middle of the barbell breaks, the entire economy could come crashing down. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.
If you made $2,000 an hour and worked full-time all the way from the birth of Jesus Christ until today and never paid any taxes, saved all your money, you would have around $8.3 billion. And there would still be 70 Americans who are richer than you. And to reach the same amount of money as our good hardworking friend Elon Musk, you would have to work for another 185,000 years. Full-time, $2,000 an hour, never spending anything, no taxes. It's impossible for a single person to work so hard that they become a billionaire. A millionaire, sure, but a billionaire is a lot more than a millionaire, and I don't think all of you understand that. The way people become billionaires is not through their own hard work. It is through other people's hard work. It is through exploitation. It is through cheap wages. It is through that. If you think there's some magical, ethical way that you could work really hard and become a billionaire all on your own, I'll see you in 2,000 years.
Major economic news breaking right now as Amazon has announced they are going to lay off 16,000 corporate employees, and they are going to close almost all of their Amazon Go and Amazon Fresh stores across the country in a matter of days. This is huge, guys. This is a major blow to the economy, and the Federal Reserve has just now made their decision on whether or not to cut interest rates, and they have decided they are going to leave the rates unchanged for the moment. Not sure if this news from Amazon impacted that decision at all, or what data they're exactly going off of, but Trump seems to think the economy is doing great. He keeps saying that, even though Americans are feeling the pain in their pocketbooks. The Federal Reserve has been under immense pressure from Trump to keep cutting rates, but they are holding strong, maintaining their independence that Trump has also been threatening. Let me know what you guys think about this all. Comment, like, share, spread the word. Follow, subscribe, and I'll see you back here for the 411.
If the economy is fine, why does it feel like a luxury to get Chipotle right now? Because that's literally what Chipotle's own CEO has been warning about. In October 2025, its CEO, Scott Boatwright, told analysts they were seeing pressure from customers ages 25 to 35, especially households earning under $100,000. And these people are coming less often because they feel the pinch. He pointed to a mix of rising unemployment, resumed student loan payments, and sluggish wage growth. But at the same time, something else is happening. And this is where the story gets a little uncomfortable. Luxury is booming. Rolex had one of the strongest sales years in history, with demand still far outstripping supply. High-end travel is packed. First-class cabins are full. Premium credit card spending keeps hitting records. The number of global billionaires is way higher than it was pre-pandemic, and their combined wealth has doubled in the last 5 years. And the stock market, which mostly benefits the top, has recovered way faster than wages ever did. So on one side of the economy, people are cutting back on burritos, but on the other side, people are buying $15,000 watches and booking weekend getaways without even thinking twice. Same country, same month, same inflation rate, but two totally different economies. And before you jump into the usual conclusion like the middle class is dying, not so fast. Because what's happening right now is not a clean collapse, it's a split. The K-shaped economy is what it's called, and it's not about people getting poor, it's about some people moving up while others slide down, all at the exact same time. one line of the economy keeps rising, powered by assets, investments, and high income. The other line is bending downward, squeezed by rent, food, debt, and just everyday costs. So that shape, showing one arm up, one arm down, is the K. And once you start looking for it, you can actually see it almost everywhere. The classic definition came into mainstream talk during the pandemic era. And the idea was simple. After a shock, parts of the economy rebound fast while other parts stagnate or decline, hence the K. Now, originally people used K-shaped recovery to describe industries, like tech and finance were flying while restaurants and hospitality were drowning. But in 2025, that conversation shifted. The K now represents people. Higher income households are doing fine, sometimes great because they own assets, have stable jobs, and they can absorb higher prices. Lower and middle income households are getting squeezed because the costs that matter most, like housing, insurance, food, childcare, car payments, well, those keep going up. They don't wait for your wages to go up. The AP described this in late 2025 as an unusually muddy economy. Strong growth and a booming stock market alongside weak confidence and more strained lower.
All right, everyone. The January layoff notices are absolutely piling up. Let me just give you a small list of layoffs for January so far. Amazon, Home Depot, UPS, Cigna. I was told today 2,000 people were laid off at Cigna. Meta, Nike, Pinterest, General Motors, a company called Trek, Trek, is teetering on the brink of bankruptcy and laying off. Also, a Houston company with 4,500 employees called Dow Inc. is teetering also on the brink of layoff. 2025, we saw almost 1.2 million people lose their job. That was a 4.5-year high. 60% of companies are planning on laying off this year in 2026. We are going to hit a catastrophic job market, even worse than it is now. Hi, my name's Christina. I have a master's degree in business. The best thing I can tell you is do not spend money. You need to save money. You need to trim your budget. You need to tell all your money exactly where it goes ahead of time. And you need to monitor your spending daily. If you would like a free budget template, just comment budget below. Please follow me for all things personal finance. I talk about budgeting, getting out of debt, how to do an emergency savings, tax planning, estate plan, how to invest your money. Drop a comment and follow for more.
Why haven't Trump's tariffs destroyed our economy yet?
Well, it's a good question. Almost all economists think that tariffs were a bad idea, and I still think that it will have bad effects on the U.S. economy, and not to mention other economies in the future. But one has to admit that the forecast that it would show up right away and big increase in inflation or fall in income, those worries have not materialized. I think there's basically 5 reasons, all of which suggest that the ill effects might show up in this year, in 2026. First, we have imperfect statistics for the latter part of 2025 due to the government shutdown. There's a lag, and some statistics are never going to be fully reported. That's a temporary phenomenon, obviously. Second, firms had stockpiled inventories. They knew the tariffs were coming, so they built up a lot of inventories ahead of time. And they don't raise the price to the customer until they've exhausted the old inventory that they bought at the lower price. Third, even after that, they may absorb some of the cost of the tariff in their other profits. Firms may reduce their profits in order to avoid passing it through to the consumer, and that's probably what's happened. There's cited an example of one study by Alberto Cavallo and co-authors at Harvard Business School. Foreign exporters, China or anyone else, have not lowered the price That's the prediction of the Trump people, is that they'll lower the price that they get for their exports to the U.S. And then when you add the tariff on top, it'll come out to the same price as before. But they have not lowered their price. It has not been fully passed through to the consumer yet because firms have taken it out of their profit margins. They've shielded the consumer up until now, but that's likely to come to an end imminently. And finally, it is already having negative effects on the economy, but we've had another force offsetting it, namely the boom from artificial intelligence.
UPS just announced 30,000 job layoffs in 2026 in the U.S. What? Yes, UPS, the United Parcel Service, just announced 30,000 job layoffs in 2026 and closing 24 service centers. What? Yes. Why would they be doing this? Well, a slowdown in packages, a slowdown in purchasing. Amazon, they say, have slowed quite a bit, and I wonder why they've slowed down. Let's see. Who's in charge of the tariff policy in this country that makes things become more expensive? Who's in charge of the economic policy in the United States now for over a year? Who has seen the economy only grow at a slower and slower and slower pace? Who is in charge? You all tell me. We're on TikTok now, so I want to be careful about mentioning names, but you all know who. 30,000 jobs by UPS. That is not good. We're going the wrong direction. Love dear for my Democrats, my MAGAs, my crazies, my cuckoos, and my burned out light bulbs. 30,000 jobs at UPS will be gone in 2026, thanks to you-know-who in the White House.
President Trump is trying to replace Jerome Powell by stating he has a new nomination for Federal Reserve Chair. Please understand that of all the people who are in the public eye in the Trump administration, Jerome Powell is legitimately doing his job. Trump is mad that Jerome Powell won't lower the interest rates here in the United States. Understand that if Jerome Powell lowers the interest rates, we are going to go into economic crisis. And I will explain why. The United States spends more money than we take in tax revenue. We have already spent this money. We've spent too much money because mostly of our military spending. Now we have to ask other countries, please buy our treasury bonds, invest in our country, give us cash. We'll give you some interest, but give us cash right now because we really need to pay for stuff. If we lower the interest rate, countries will not invest in us because they won't get a good return on their investment. So Trump is trying to force Jerome Powell's hand, but it's going to be detrimental to the United States economy. This is stacked on top of the fact that the U.S. dollar has depreciated 11.5% since Trump has taken office. 10% of that was when Trump started his trade war, which should not have happened because that's supposed to be an act of Congress. And now just since Tuesday, I believe, we dropped another 1.5% because on camera, Trump said he is happy that our dollar is depreciating. So a bunch of investors were like, if he wants this to happen, we need to get rid of our treasury bonds. We need to get rid of it. We can't invest in the U.S. anymore. So now we've dropped even more. The price of the people are buying gold and silver at a grossly high rate. And historically, every time countries are investing in gold and silver, the United States is about to go into an economic crisis. Our dollar being strong and being used for trade is what has kept us afloat. It's what made us a safe investment for other countries. Now other countries are noticing that there is a problem, so they're investing in gold and silver instead of U.S. Treasury bonds. So if we lower the interest rates, we are going to lose any incentive we have for countries to invest in us instead of gold and silver. And now the dollar's depreciating, which makes the investment in us even less enticing. This is going to unfortunately send us into a potential financial crisis in the U.S. alone. This will be one of the few times it's not going to affect the rest of the world. It's only going to really ruin us here in the States. You can do your research on this, and I encourage you to do it.
Bloomberg is reporting that multiple U.S. companies are announcing mass layoffs, and these others are expected to do the same in what's quickly becoming one of the largest countrywide job cuts in recent history. In the latest sign that major changes are coming for the United States economy, employers across nearly every sector, from tech to healthcare, have announced layoffs totaling in the tens of thousands, with some companies citing efficiency gained from AI as the main reason. It's likely most are conducting the cuts as purely a money-saving measure intended to quickly boost the company's stock price, and this time no one was safe as the hardest-hit companies spanned multiple industries. In tech, Amazon led the charge by laying off 16,000 corporate employees, most of them engineers. Pinterest followed by letting go roughly 15% of their entire workforce. Other sectors impacted include Nike and FedEx in the retail space, Expedia in travel, and Blue Shield of California in healthcare. But things are only getting worse from here, with even more companies announcing their intention to join in on future layoffs, as corporate America, including Microsoft, who announced that they will conduct one of the largest layoffs in their recent history, and UPS, who plans to cut a whopping 30,000 total jobs this year, both viewed the current situation as an opportunity to reduce headcount without drawing the public backlash that typically comes with mass job cuts.
Breaking news: as of now, 22 states are in an official recession. This means that for a vast portion of Americans, we are facing economic hardship. So don't let economists and Fox News reporters tell you we're fine, we're not in a recession, because we are, and we have the data to prove it. Recession is often characterized by lack of job opportunities as well as persistent economic hardship lasting more than a few months. Current estimates suggest that 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and many people are struggling to put food on the table each day. States currently in or on the brink of recession include Oregon, Georgia, and Illinois, where I currently live. There has been a significant decline in economic activity in these states that has lasted for more than a few months. The craziest thing is that the District of Columbia, or DC, the capital of the country, is one of the territories that's hit the hardest right now. But why? Largely because of Trump's economic plan and the tariffs. So many politicians are lying to us right now by saying that our economy is the greatest in the world, especially those on the right. And I want you to know right now that no, you're not crazy. Yes, the economy is worse. Yes, it is harder to get a job. And yes, it is because of the person who is in office right now, as well as various other factors. Crazy, and we're only 1 year into his presidency.
I'm a financial expert, and the question that I've been getting the most over the past couple months or so is when will things return to normal in terms of the economy and money? And it's a really hard question to answer because I don't think the normal that people are thinking of will ever exist again. And I want to talk about 5 current things happening in the economy that has happened really in 2025 that I think will continue in 2026, and how to be thinking about kind of your money and the economy going forward. So I think the biggest story of 2025 was the prosperity paradox, or the vibe session, where the economy looked great on paper or in headlines, like the stock market did well, there's relatively low unemployment, there was positive GDP growth, but if you talk to most people, they were struggling financially. The prices, because of inflation going up, was really hurting a lot of people's wallets. We experienced a K-shaped recovery where rich people were doing great and everybody else was struggling. So the economy was quote unquote working on paper, but not for most people. And so then you get the second trend, which is the affordability lockout, where you have these high prices that have really not kept up with wage growth. And on top of that, while inflation has stayed pretty steady around between 2 or 3% over the past year, the actual cost for daily goods and services has gone up way more than that. If you think about groceries, car insurance, utilities, etc. And that disproportionately hurts people that are lower income because they are spending a larger amount of their paychecks on daily goods and services. So their budgets are getting hurt. They're feeling the stress more. And on top of that, the other big thing is the job market. And I think most people are aware of how just weird and frozen the job market has been. It's no hire and no fire, though layoffs are starting to pick up, which I think we'll continue to see into 2026. And on top of that, people that are looking for jobs right now know how horrible it feels with AI, where they're just applying to dozens and dozens of jobs and not hearing back. And it's just been kind of this overall shit show. And the third big story of 2025 that I think we will see continue into 2026 is the casinofication of everything. And I'm talking about prediction markets, sports betting, other types of gambling, etc. When wealth building becomes impossible or just feels very difficult for people, the system is not going to make it more accessible. It just encourages gambling. And I think we see this mass normalization of gambling-like activities, and how so much of investing or just making money these days is built around betting and taking these very high risk, potentially high reward activities, aka gambling. The fourth story is like bankification, which I've talked about before if you follow me. This idea that every company is a bank now or is trying to offer financial services because the margins are very good. And we see this kind of almost like embedded finance in all of our activities where you can now store your money in like almost every company. If you think about like Starbucks or like airlines. And a lot of it is designed to be extracting to kind of separate you from your money. And I think we're going to see the continued use of these types of, financial technology in the space where people will have to navigate kind of all these different mini financial systems throughout their daily lives. And the fifth thing that kind of connects these four trends is extraction over sustainability. And if you think about like a lot of key aspects of our economy right now are very much built around extraction. And if you follow the kind of the paper trail of why it feels like a lot of things have gotten significantly worse over the past couple years, it can mostly be traced back to private equity and private equity model and how private equity has infiltrated so many aspects of our daily life. And I would argue that so much of prosperity, if you think about the American dream, is very much policy-based, policy that encourages or gives people the ability to build wealth on their own terms. And so much of that policy has become dismantled, which obviously opens the door for extraction because that is typically how capitalism is set up. So all of this is to say, will 2026 feel normal? No. I would say no, because a lot of these trends that I just pointed out are not temporary things that are happening. They are how the system is working right now. And so if you're curious to learn more about kind of these trends and what to actually do and how to actually survive in the 2026 economy, you should check out my new newsletter. You can check it out. The link is in my bio.
So apparently people are surprised that the real estate mogul they put in charge of the economy wants to use that power to make real estate value go up.
There's so much talk about, we're going to drive housing prices down. I don't want to drive housing prices down. I want to drive housing prices up.
What did you think he meant when he said he wanted to run the country like a business? How does big business work? Well, they maximize profits and shareholder value by squeezing the consumers and the employees. See, when you increase productivity and prices but do not increase wages to match that growth, then you make the buying power of the money you're paying your employees go down. That means if you're somebody whose wealth is tied to their salary, you now have to work more hours to afford the same amount of stuff as you used to. It also means that if you're somebody whose wealth is tied to ownership, that means that the stuff you own, businesses, real estates, assets, and so on, is now worth more relative to the price of production than it used to be. So essentially, the increased value of the stuff you own comes out of the time, effort, and energy of the people who labored to make that stuff. Your energy, your effort, your time, your life, that's where the value is being taken from, which is vampirism, right? That's what a vampire does. They consume life to empower themselves. These people are literally vampires, and I mean literally. It's not an analogy or a metaphor. The idea of a vampire that's in your head, some ghoulish count who lives in a castle and draws the life blood directly out of the neck of a beautiful young virgin girl, that's the metaphor. This is a symbol of corruption and power strengthening and sustaining itself by feeding on a symbol of innocence and virtue. This is you. This is you. This is how stories work. They use fiction to tell truths using symbolic imagery. Now, one of the implications in a symbol like this is that if this is where the power is coming from, then this is where the power actually is. This is where the power actually is. Now, traditionally in the story, in order for this transfer of power to occur, some sort of consent needs to be given. You have to be willingly lured into their castle, usually with the promise of safety or sanctuary or wealth or opportunity. Or you have to willingly invite them past your threshold and into your home before they can enter and begin the feast. Now, in real life, consent is usually manufactured through propaganda. Now, propaganda is kind of storytelling in reverse, right? Using symbolic truths to tell lies that shape the way you see the world. Like perpetuating the myth of the merit system, the idea that the ultra-wealthy are so successful because they work hard, and if you are not one of them, it must be because you don't work hard enough.
We're not going to destroy the value of their homes so that somebody that didn't work very hard can buy a home.
Now, the idea that hard work and perseverance and willpower can create amazing results is a truth, right? And it's a truth that's so deeply ingrained in us, it's become the central symbolic pillar in millions and millions of stories that our species has told for thousands and thousands of years. But the idea that our modern economic infrastructure is built on that virtue is an obvious lie. And the way they sneak that lie past your logical faculties is by leveraging your emotions against you, specifically shame and pride. The reason you're not a billionaire is because you don't work hard enough. That's not my fault, it's your own fault. You should work harder. And besides, you're not struggling because the game is rigged against you, it's because you're still on your way. You're just not a billionaire yet. So don't worry about trying to fix a system that clearly benefits me at your expense. Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you'll be in my place in no time. Never mind that the person telling you this got their start through a small loan of $1 million from their father, followed by a small inheritance of over $400 million from their father. Never mind that your parents or grandparents had twice as much as you did and half as much debt and still somehow had the time to make it home for dinner every day. You are simply not working hard enough. See, if you allow someone to shape the way you perceive reality in a way that facilitates them taking advantage of you, so you let them past your threshold and into your home, and now they can feast.
It's amazing to me how little people around the world know just how a world economy works. Because I've seen lots of comments like this, saying that if the US were to invade Greenland, that Europe will just bankrupt or crash the US economy. By crashing the US economy, Europe's economy would crash too. Let me explain. Yes, while it's true that Europe as a whole owns a lot of US debt, as in over $3 trillion worth, with the UK being the largest holder, selling off US debt would actually hurt the European economy because a lot of Europe's reserves are in the dollar, which gives the United States significant leverage. So by devaluing the dollar, Europe actually devalues their own economy. And we live in a world economy, which means every country relies on everybody else. Europe gets much of their pharmaceuticals, machinery, and technology from the United States. Here's an example of just how fragile the world economy is. So let's say Apple's making the iPhone, and they require microchips from Thailand, let's say, and processing parts from China, and metals used for those parts from Europe. If one of those pieces are disruptive, it sends a trickle effect throughout the rest of the world. And the US is the largest world economy. A crashed US economy would spell disaster for the rest of the world. California, by itself, is the fourth largest economy in the world if it was its own country. California has a larger economy than the country of Japan. In fact, if California were its own country, there would only be 3 countries in the world with a larger economy than California. That would be the US, China, and Germany. That's it. So for all of those hundreds or thousands of people who have come onto the comments section saying that Europe could just bankrupt the United States if the United States invades Greenland, you're wrong. That's just not how the economy works.
Earlier this week, the White House announced that we have new data that suggests that we are finally entering an era of lower prices and lower inflation, and that Americans are receiving bigger paychecks. And to back up this point, they cite this graph, which demonstrates that grocery prices on breakfast items have dropped 14% over the last 6 months, which is exciting. We've been waiting for this moment. Except when you look into the report itself and you look where the data are coming from, you'll see that there is some misunderstandings, I'll put that lightly, about how they are interpreting the data that's there. And as an economist, I want to talk about what is going on here. First of all, when you look at this graph, the first thing you should ask yourself is, where are the data coming from? Where is the White House citing this data from? And when you look at the report, they are citing it from DoorDash's State of Local Commerce report. I will note that DoorDash is the most popular food delivery platform in the United States with around 42 million active users in 2024. But 42 million is a small subset of the over 300 million Americans that need to purchase food and need to purchase supplies every year. So you're essentially using data from a small subset of the economy to draw bigger generalizations. And people do that all the time, except you do need to make sure that the population of people who use DoorDash reflect the greater population or control for different factors that might make DoorDash users different than the American population, right? That's data science 101 here. Not to mention the fact that why are we relying on the government measurements of inflation like CPI, like PPI, that we would normally rely on to measure inflation wildly over time? Part of that has to do with the fact that we've riffed a lot of federal employees, especially those in the Department of Labor and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that calculate inflation, and the fact that also we don't have access to that data right now because a bunch of folks are furloughed due to the government shutdown. But that's besides the point. So I want to look at this report and what the data are actually measuring here. Because when you look at this graph, right, it says that breakfast prices are decreasing by 14%, but it doesn't actually tell you what they're exactly counting as a part of breakfast prices. When we look at this report, which measures, among other things, everyday essentials and the cheeseburger index, which shows that prices are increasing by 3.8% over the last 12 months, we can find how DoorDash is specifically calculating the breakfast basics index. And what they are measuring here is the price, again, on DoorDash.com through hundreds of millions of transactions, looking at 3 eggs, a glass of milk, a bagel, and an avocado. As someone who analyzes data, it just seems very peculiar to me that DoorDash is specifically selecting things like eggs that have had very high inflation in the last couple of years, and that inflation has started to come down, and not included a lot of American breakfast staples like coffee that have experienced exorbitant inflation over the last year. So to me, it just seems very suspicious that they could possibly be cherry picking certain types of products to convey a certain story. When you look at the data tracking the 4 items in DoorDash's breakfast basics index over time, which again is coming from their own data, you will see that a lot of the decline, specifically in the last 6 months, is primarily coming from the egg prices decreasing. The prices of avocado are decreasing a little bit, but the bagel and milk prices are mostly flat. And the reason why a lot of these egg prices are going down and why the prices were so high to begin with is because there was an avian flu that unalived a lot of farmers' chickens. And only now have we started to recoup. Sorry, that was totally intentional. But we've only started to recoup those flock numbers. So only now, right, the shortage that we had of eggs, which was driving the prices up, has started to correct itself, which means, if we think about economics 101, the prices would start to go down. Now, I will give the White House credit here in the sense that in March of 2025, the USDA announced that it would invest $1 billion in trying to combat the bird flu epidemic and help lower egg prices, because that seems to be what's happening here. However, a lot of agricultural economists have noted that this bird flu that we've seen is very seasonal. So these declines in egg prices that we're seeing from March to November could increase in the winter because of these spikes of avian flu. So how much the White House's actions are actually impacting overall egg production and egg prices, we would have to wait quite a bit more time to see what that impact is. Also, interestingly, this graph that the White House is using to show this decrease in the breakfast basics index shows a decline from $5.50 to around $3.25, which if you do the math is about a 40% decrease, not 14, 40. So it's showing a more dramatic decline than their own numbers are reporting. But again, we are specifically relying on DoorDash data to make these assumptions, which again represents a small subset of the entire US economy and the prices that people would pay for eggs. Not to mention, and I can make another video about the labor data that DoorDash is using to prove a point here, but they're relying on consumers' perceptions of how they think businesses are doing rather than like actual data about business closures. So they cite here that 56% of consumers say they've seen fewer businesses close. I just find it very interesting the data sources that they are using to prove a point here. Ultimately, this series that I'm doing on data visualization and pointing out different things is to make you more aware as someone who consumes reports or news or information, to make you more aware of the different things that people might do to use data to prove a point. Because we as humans inherently have biases. And while the goal, like especially as someone who analyzes data all the time, is to be as unbiased as possible, it's important to just be aware of some of the blatant biases that people can have when reporting certain statistics. And that's all I got today. If you have any questions, let me know.
You know, the moment I realized that we're all fucked, it was last night when I saw the press conference. Our president, Mr. Trump, was telling everybody how great we're all doing and how much better the economy's doing since old crooked Joe Biden was thrown out of the White House. Because now, groceries are down like 25%. Your turkey's gonna cost less. All your fixins are gonna be less. Turkey, chicken, steak. Goes on and on, talking about how cheap everything is. How your gas is so low now. And I realized these people in government are fucking delusional. If you have no idea how bad the country's doing, no offense, but you shouldn't be in charge. I've been saying it for years. We shouldn't have anybody that's rich be in power, because they can't relate to normal people like you and I. They have no idea what it's like to decide if you want to pay a bill or buy something to eat to feed your family. They have no idea what it's like to get a shutoff notice from the power company. They have no idea what it's like when you can't afford to buy fuel oil or gas to heat your home. So yeah, I realized last night everyone's fucked. Because you're on your own, I'm on my own. Everyone's on their own from now on because they think that we're all doing great. And they're gonna stay with that. They're gonna stay with that because then they don't have to feel guilty. Either that, or they're so fucking stupid that they don't want to open their eyes to see the truth. Either way, congratulations, because we're all on our own now.
We've got some layoff updates today. January 27, 2026. Nike is laying off 775 employees. The main areas where it's going to lay off is Tennessee and Mississippi. And yes, those are both red states. Also, Amazon is going to be laying off another 30,000 people coming up this year in 2026. They already laid off 18,000. If you did not know, 58% of companies are expected to do layoffs in 2026. It already started in January with 128 companies filing what's called a layoff notice, a WARN notice on the layoff website called warntracker.com. If you have not visited that website, I highly recommend it because you'll get a 60-day notice on layoffs for companies with 50 or more employees. If you did not know, a few months ago, we were already at 4.6 unemployment rate, which is gone up every month. And that is old data, as high as 6% in some states. Expect unemployment rate to go up. What happens when people don't have a job and they don't spend money? It hurts the economy. Consumer confidence is down for 10 straight months in a row. Please do the best that you can to get your finances in order. That starts with number one, tracking your spending and then putting that into a budget and sticking to that budget before you get your paycheck and during the time that you're spending. If you comment budget 2026, I will send you a free budget template worksheet. drop a comment. Follow.
President Trump made his pick for the new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, but Wall Street is not happy about it, with one economist this morning saying that it is the worst choice the president could have made. So what is Wall Street seeing that they're so concerned about here? This isn't so much about what Warsh could do, but what he's already done. He has committed a sin on Wall Street that is unforgivable for some investors. And this goes back to the global financial crisis. So Kevin Warsh was the only Fed governor at the time who was worried about inflation, even as the economy was entering a recession. What do I mean by that? When the economy is entering recession, demand is suppressed. Consumers are not spending a lot of money. They're losing their jobs. They are not in a position to spend. In a situation like that, the Federal Reserve's typical reaction is to make financial conditions as loose as possible to try and prop up the economy and save it from entering an even worse downturn. Instead of focusing on that at the time, Kevin Warsh was focused on a concern that if they made financial conditions too loose, consumers would have too easy of a time spending money and that inflation would skyrocket. He had a very contrarian view, and the investors that I've spoken with this morning have not necessarily forgiven him for that. But what does this tell us about what Warsh is actually going to do? Well, he hasn't said what his plan is with regards to interest rates, and that is very typical for a Fed chair. Jerome Powell was an expert at this. You don't want to tell people too much of what your plan is because any single economic data point could change that plan. But we do have some insight into his thinking, and one of his big theses is that AI is going to be a huge disinflationary force, thus allowing the Federal Reserve to not have to be as hawkish when it comes to fighting inflation. So that could be a sign that Warsh and Trump are aligned on keeping rates lower for longer. As always, comment with any questions you have about this, and be sure to follow me.
They're pimping us out. The leaders of the United States economy have gone to Davos, to the World Economic Forum, and bragged about how good they are at exploiting us.
The United States is a premier destination for global capital.
Why is it that they say we need to be self-sustaining as a country, and then they go to this place and they ask for people from all around the world, the global elite, to come and purchase United States businesses and resources and own something in America when most workers in America don't own anything?
Our country now has the most favorable tax, energy, and regulatory environment in the world, ensuring even stronger returns for partners who invest in America.
He didn't say wages are up. He didn't say prices are down. He didn't describe any metric that matters for regular people in the economy. He said that investors are doing well, shareholders.
Since the election, the stock market has set 52 all-time high records.
Workers are being more productive than ever before, but owners of the big businesses are keeping the money for themselves. Because as corporate profits soar and investors and shareholders make more money than ever, workers just got the smallest share of capital since 1947.
Everyone said, oh, you're going to do all these tariffs, you're going to destroy the world. The world's stock markets are up. Which ones of them? All of them.
The top 1% owns half of the stock in the United States. The top 10% holds 90%. The bottom 50% in the United States own 1% of total stock. When they say invest in America, they're inviting rich people from around the world to come make money through the exploitation machine they've created. That's what they mean. Come put a little bit of money in and get a share of this profit extraction machine.
Starbucks is closing 434 stores in the U.S., and it's the largest shutdown since 2008. Do you remember what happened in 2008? The Great Recession. And this is only the first wave. Mass layoffs are expected in January 2026. We have already lost 1.2 million jobs, the highest amount of job losses since COVID. Unemployment average is 4.6%, but it's as high as 6% in other states. And yes, that number has gone up every single month. We have a record number of manufacturing plants closing, mostly in red states. We have lost 58,000 manufacturing jobs and climbing. Companies are not hiring. We now have a tariff, an extra tax on U.S. importers passed on to the consumer. Grocery prices have been skyrocketing. This is a very bad time to lose your job because there's no more Affordable Care Act. Yes, Republicans got rid of it with no plan after 16 years. 28 million Americans use the Affordable Care Act, and mostly in red states. Hi, my name's Christina. I have a master's degree in business. Please do the best that you can to not spend money and get. Today is January 28th, 2026, and this is your update on the economy. Following with the record number of bankruptcies in the United States, we have two different industries that I'm going to tell you that are going to be in big trouble this year. This restaurant is going bankrupt. Twin Peaks. It is a restaurant. Restaurants are going to suffer greatly in bankruptcy in 2026. Most people that eat out, that's discretionary income. The next industry is going to be retail. Macy's is going bankrupt. They restructured a lot in 2026 and they're continuing to close stores in 2026. So retail and restaurants, and most retailers, 50% say it's going to get worse. Think about it. Are you shopping and eating out? Hi, my name's Christina. I have a master's degree in business. The economy is collapsing every single day. Bankruptcies are at an all-time high, a 15-year high, and they are so far 11% higher in 2025 than 2024. Expect those numbers to skyrocket in 2026. That will be business bankruptcy, farm bankruptcies, and personal bankruptcy. Drop a comment and follow for more.